We have a concern about segregation within school. And this table gives us a way of looking at the kinds of things that happen to students in schools depending on the racial composition in schools. So if the high school percent Black and Hispanic is given in that far left column, ranging from 1% to 100%, less than 1% to 100%. What I'm asking here is, given the racial composition of the school, being both Black and Hispanic, what are the odds of being labeled gifted and talented? So if in a school where the percent Black or Hispanic is approximately 1% or less, the odds of being labeled about 0.63, a little greater than 0.5%. If the school racial composition increases to about 5%, then the odds of being labeled gifted and talented are less than half of 1. And that pattern persists of being right around 0.4, 0.5, all the way through to what happens when a school gets to be about 75% or greater Black or Hispanic. The odds of being labeled gifted and talented, using the better resources in the school, gets much closer to 1. So you have about an equal chance, a fair chance, of being in the gifted and talented program when you're in a school where the racial composition is more like your own race, ethnicity, if you're a Black and Hispanic student. But what about the odds of being in special education? They're greater than 1. So the likelihood of being overrepresented in special education is actually higher in all but those last 2 categories. And the 51 or higher Black and Hispanic enrollment, that's when it begins to reduce, but not necessarily significantly. It's still much greater than 1. Similarly, the odds of being suspended looks pretty peculiar when you see that the odds of being suspended from a school actually are greater when your percentage in the population, if you're Black and Hispanic, your enrollment in the school, percentage enrollment in the school, is actually 25% or less. So we're looking at patterns of the use of these kinds of school practices that actually are more deleterious in schools where Black students are a smaller portion of the school population. Similarly, for being expelled. If you're in a school that's 1 to 5% Black or Hispanic, your odds are great, almost twice as great compared to those of your white peers. When we split this, looking at it by high poverty, low poverty schools, the pattern doesn't really change. In fact, in some ways, it's exacerbated. If you look at the high poverty categories, you'll see that the odds are pretty consistently greater than 1 for almost all of those outcomes, particularly being in special education, being suspended, or being expelled. Segregation across schools also has the consequence of limiting access to some of the high caliber resources we know that schools could have. And I'll just use one example here, Lowell High School from San Francisco. The school is about 14% Black or Latino. And in 1996, the school had about 21 AP courses and another 16 honors courses. If you look at any school that has greater than a 15 or 20% Black and Latino enrollment, you'll see that that number of courses are simply not available to Black and Latino students. That number of AP courses. They're simply not in the building, not even offered by the schools that have a greater percentage of Black and Latino students. And that pattern is consistent from 96 through 2000. This is school-based, school-level data. And again, that's 2000 data. No telling what it might look like now. They had the Williams case a few years back, about a decade ago. And what this means is that in many instances, Black and Latino students could be attending schools where they're literally knocking the academic top off the school, but they're not in a school that provides them with access to the range and quality of AP courses that they could be taking. I was an expert witness in the Michigan case. Michigan used a fairly complex formula to arrive at its admissions decisions. The plaintiffs charged that the University of Michigan gave too much weight to race. However, when you look at the data and begin to analyze it, you see a recurring pattern, such as that I pointed to in the case of San Francisco in terms of access to AP courses. For the applicants in the high schools in the Detroit metropolitan area who were a part of the applicant pool from 95 to 98. We looked at the AP courses that were offered by the schools in that area, in the metropolitan Detroit area. And we looked at the difference in schools offering AP courses depending on whether the students were Black, Asian, American Indian, Hispanic, or white. Of the schools that Black students attended, 71% had 3 or fewer AP courses. For Asian students, they attended schools that they only attended 21% of the schools that had 3 or fewer AP courses. American Indian students attended, well, literally about 40% of the schools they attended. 40% of the students attended schools that had 3 or fewer. For Hispanic students, 53% attended schools that had 3 or fewer AP courses. And for white students, 24% of white students attended schools that had 3 or fewer courses. And why is this significant? It's significant because the Michigan admissions formula gave disproportionate weight not just to attending a high caliber school with a strong curriculum, but it also favored those students who actually partook of those more challenging courses. So, if you were an African American, a Latino, or American Indian, you had less likelihood of being able to enrich your high school experience in a way that would give you significant favor with respect to admission to Michigan, as long as Michigan was using that formula. The racial composition of the school and the poverty composition of schools also shapes access to teacher quality. This is an example that's run on the state of Illinois in the high school class of